of LPG, almost 6 until 7 tons per year. So this project also has attracted world investor attention. So the Ministry of Investment targeted to increase the value added of 21 commodities from 8 sectors. The policy will generate investment opportunities of 545.3 billion US dollar, or around 8,272 trillion rupiah. So, meanwhile, as we know that the United States government launched a friendshoring policy to encourage multinational companies to reallocate their industrial activities to countries with friends of United States friendshoring. So friendshoring is expected to mitigate U.S. value chain risks caused by geopolitical issues and other disruption. So in the light of all that has been mentioned so far, this webinar will inform the participants the direction of friendshoring policy, Inflation Reduction Act, and Indonesia downstreaming agenda. Very distinguished participants, last but not least, let us ensure today's discussion will answer the following question. For instance, can Indonesia harness the Friendshoring and Inflation Reduction Act for downstreaming industry agenda? And what action must Indonesia take in order to reap benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act or other friendshoring policy? And will the friendshoring and IRA be a good chance for Indonesia to succeed in the downstreaming agenda by attracting new investment? This webinar will also address this issue and help to strengthen the global value chains of Indonesia and United States. And I hope that we will have a fruitful discussion that can contribute to attract more investment in Indonesia and to boost the economy through friendshoring. Thank you.
Oke,
I get back to Mbak Ria.
Thank you Ibu Oyster for your welcoming remarks. Selanjutnya saya akan persilahkan Bapak Daniel Wit untuk menyampaikan sambutannya. For the next session, I will invite Mr. Dan Wade to deliver welcoming remarks. The time is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Ria and Dr. Esther. Always insightful comments. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you. I think of our two recent op-ed pieces that I was honored to co-author with you, that I'm equally honored to have them accepted and published in the Jakarta Post. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning for those of you in Indonesia. Good evening to you gathered in the United States, and we may have a few in between in Europe, or I currently am in South Africa, so I'm in the middle. I trust, as many of us are familiar, as Dr. Esther reminded us, last April, the United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen made a positive contribution to global trade when she delivered remarks on the concept of friendshoring. This was intended to be an alternative to reshoring, which is simply bringing back all manufacturing to your home, to, in our case, the United States. And this would be perhaps extremely difficult, uneconomic, impractical, and it would have severe negative consequences on international trade. Instead, this proposal for friendshoring, the U.S. wants to work with trusted allies and partners to build supply chains that are robust, resilient, and take advantage of high standards in manufacturing and production. I mean, it needs to be high standard, high quality. Naturally, this is an initiative that is an excellent fit for Indonesia. Indonesia is already a valued partner of the United States. At the same time, as Esther mentioned, President Joko has started a major initiative to build economic growth through the downstream industrial development. And I term this as kind of expanding the value chain. You want more processed products, more production, more value added in Indonesia, maybe all the way up in some cases to finished products. And I think that there is a great confluence of your downstreaming and the friendshoring, one on the supply side, the other on the demand market side, for further collaboration and a deepening of the economic and trade cooperation between our countries. Today, we are honored to be joined by senior officials of the Indonesian government, including Minister La Dalia, your Minister of Investment and head of the Indonesian Investment Coordination Board. He is joined by his team, including Deputy Minister Ashwan, who is responsible for investment promotion, and also Mr. Mohammed from the ministry. And we are honored to have a video comment from Ambassador Russalini, who is Indonesia's ambassador to the United States. At the moment, he is up in the US Congress listening to President Biden deliver the State of the Union address, so he is not with us for a good reason. And of course, there is no better host and organizer for today's webinar than our longtime friend, Indef and Pak Didik Rashbini. Pak Didik and I have a friendship dating back 12 or more years, and we're delighted to be continuing this deep cooperation. And of course, Dr. Esther Aishan Rashbini will be joining us to share some of their research on the downstreaming in Indonesia and how that can be taken a step further as you look at market opportunities for this deeper value chain in Indonesia through friendshoring and hopefully, deepening the ties with the United States. And I'm delighted that my longtime friend and colleague, John Gardner, who is a veteran of as a senior staff member in 2 White Houses, the former general counsel of USAID. He knows government, he knows economic development policy, and he will share his insights to make sure we get an understanding of some of the practical realities of these nice political slogans. As I mentioned, I'm sitting in South Africa at the moment. I was a speaker yesterday at the Mining Indaba. This is the largest gathering in the world of mining executives and suppliers and financiers. There's over 9,000 people at this meeting. And yesterday we were honored to hear President Ramaphosa from South Africa speak, and he talked a lot about the very same things that your president in Indonesia has been leading. And in fact, I think you may have been one of the early ones with the downstreaming. But no longer are we living in a world where resource-rich countries are satisfied to just dig the resources out of the ground and ship them overseas. They need to be processed. Value needs to be added in your country. That creates innovation, it creates jobs, and it creates more revenue for your economy. So how do you take those ideas and make them work? It's a long game, the training of people, the investment in facilities. And then the last thing is It's easy to make these headline speeches. We want downshoring. We want friendshoring. But it's organizations like INDEF and ITIC working cooperatively with the private sector to make sure the right policy environment is in place for these businesses to deepen and grow to make these policy objectives a reality. So these are great policy initiatives, but they are just the start. The real work needs to be done to create a friendly, hospitable, realistic environment to welcome the investments and to retain the investments. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce Minister Ladalia. As I mentioned, Minister of Investment, head of the Indonesian Investment Coordination Board. He has a distinguished career in business and in government, focusing on property and the transportation sectors. He was the chairman of the Young Entrepreneurs Association before being invited by your president to join his cabinet. This is exactly the kind of experience that helps a minister be successful in driving a friendly, welcoming policy framework in a country and attract investment. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's a great honor for ITIC to be joining with INDEF. Back to you, Riyadh, and then over to the honorable and distinguished minister and entrepreneur.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for your valuable speech. As we have listened to two speeches, now we absolutely sure that Friendshoring is a very strategic program. And I hope Indonesia can take advantage and, of course, benefit from the Friendshoring policy. Now, actually, we will have a keynote speech from the Minister of Investment, Bapak Bahlil Lahadalia, and unfortunately, he has another program, but he will really come in the end of the session for closing remarks. So now I will continue to the next session, discussion session that will be led by Bapak Aryo Dharma Pahla Irhamna as the researcher of INDEF. Bapak Aryo, are you ready?
Yes, Ria, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good evening for John and Whit from DC. Welcome, everyone, to today's discussion on whether friendshoring can boost investment flow to Indonesia. We have highly relevant in this topic. For the panelists, we have Pak Nurul Ihwan. Good morning, Pak Nurul.
Good morning, Paria. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you for your time. He's Deputy Minister for Investment Promotion from the Ministry of Investment, BKPM. Also, we have John Gardner. Hi, John. Good evening. He's Vice President on Public Policy, Committee for Economic Development, which based in DC. Also, we have Pak Rosan, Indonesia Ambassador to the US, who will share some important points through video tapping since he attends the President's State of the Union. And my colleague, Asia, economist at Center of Industry, Trade and Investment at INDEF. We are honored to have them with us today to share their insight and perspective with the topic. Before we begin, let me provide a brief overview of the topic. The President Joko Widodo, as we already know, started to advance the economy through downstream industry policy in Indonesia. This policy will make the transition from low-cost production to high-value-added manufacturing industry. The government has started this approach by introducing the nickel smelter project as a flagship of this downstream industry agenda. This project also has attracted world investor attention, which maybe will presented by Pak Nur Ihwan. In addition, the government of Indonesia also planning to introduce more priority commodities for this agenda. On the other hand, last year, the US Secretary of the Treasury, Yellen, introduced the concept of friendshoring, which places political reliability of partners as the critical aspect in designing global supply chain. And few moments after the enactment of this friendshoring, President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act or IRA. Arguably, this IRA has friendshoring elements. The IRA extended and revised number incentive to related climate change climate change, energy security, including a number of tax credits and funding to support the production of EVs, renewable energy technologies, and critical minerals. The incentives have an estimated value of around 369 billion US dollars. In view of all of that has been mentioned so far, this webinar will inform the participants the direction of foreign policy, IRA, and Indonesia investment promotion on downstreaming agenda. Also, we also discuss, can Indonesia harness the friendshoring and IRA for downstream the industry agenda? What actions must Indonesia take into order to reap benefits from the US policy? Will the friendshoring or its elements be a good chance for Indonesia to succeed in the downstream agenda by attracting new investment? This webinar will address these issues and help to strengthen the global value chain of Indonesia and US. With that, let's start our discussion by inviting our first speaker to share his thoughts on the topic. Let me call the first speaker, Pak Nurul Ihwan. You have 20 minutes. The time is yours.
All right. Thank you, Pak Arya. Could you hear my voice clearly?
Sure, Pak.
Okay, thank you. Yes, first of all, I just would like to say my appreciations to INDEF, especially led by Professor Didik Rahbini, Mbak Esther, and also other colleagues there. That is very well known with our institution in BKPM, and also high appreciations also for Mr. Daniel Witt. And thank you for supporting this event as well, because the cooperations between INDEF and ITIC is always providing very good quality event. And I am happy as well. We'll be in the same sessions together with Mr. John Gardner and Pak Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Rosan Roslani, and also Mbak Echa later on to be in these sessions. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. So I just would like also to share the first introductions by also giving a kind of emphasis about the policy coming from the government of Indonesia with downstreaming industry that we have. We know that Indonesia is having a kind of strength in the natural resources, but then we do know that when we talk about supply chains, Indonesia could play also a more significant role. And why it is significant for us? Because we are thinking that Indonesia could be contributing much more better of contributions into the supply chains at the time that the supply chains is also being interrupted or distracted by many current event happening, like let's say the geopolitical disturbance, and then also trade war and some other disaster, like let's say COVID. And because of this, and it reshaped also about the strategy of economy, many countries around the globe. It is not exclusively the United States with all the policies coming from the government there. And we know that when we talk about this friendshoring, it is also something that is still discussed and also having kind of a good attractions coming from many countries, including Indonesia. And because of this, as we just try to check what it is actually the friendshoring. If we just make a kind of making a kind of reference coming from Treasury Secretary from US, Madam Janet Yellen, we know that the United States is looking for a kind of friends in order to maintain the economy, and especially in maintaining a supply coming from other countries that could support the economy of the United States. So it means that as a kind of conclusions, Madam Yellen mentions that actually they have to work together. United States have to work together with friends that could also make a kind of trusted countries, these trusted countries to become an allies and partners from United States in order to maintain the performance of economy. So they have to rely on the countries that they know and they could count on. And also, we could also see some statements coming from the ex-British Prime Minister and also statesman Lord Palmerston. So this is also something, to me, to my understanding, it is substantially very right, because he said that we have no eternal allies and we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual. And those interests, it is our duty to follow. So I guess all countries should be at the same thing. And all countries will be trying the best they can do to protect their economy and to have a kind of a good economic operations with their allies, with their friends, in order to protect also the performance of economy. But as a kind of general things, whatever that we are thinking about supporting our own countries, still in implementations of the business, when you have, let's say, a very strong economy, still you are still looking for market. So it means that responsibility, every single country in the world, it has also a kind of interest in developing market outside of its country, because the market inside of its country is also very limited. So why should then they think about this matter? Because whatever a good quality product could be produced by one country, they are still looking for the market. And the market itself should be supported by outside market from its own country. And the possibility and the potential market that they need to be supported is a country which is having a very fundamental fuel to develop the market, to develop the economy, and to provide purchasing power parity at their home country. And Indonesia is one of the countries having this kind of fuel, a country having a rich of natural resources, a country that is very stable, and a country is having a very huge market. And we would like to be a kind of partner for America, for any country, to be the market that will provide also raw materials and also human resource and many other aspects there. So because of this, then, at the very beginning, I just would like to say that Indonesia is having kind of potential to be the new market, to be a growing market for the United States. At the time that you have a product, you are going to see also the market of Indonesia. And at the same time, vice versa, Indonesia is also having a kind of a good interest of having more collaborations with the United States to be a supplier or to be a kind of a market and to be a kind of partners to develop something to supply the product for the rest of the world. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we know that this rationale of friendshoring that is currently discussed, and especially in the United States, we know that basically we have around 40% of global trade is concentrated. So it means that many of the trading companies, they have just a very limited suppliers there. So it means that if it is not only one or two, then it is very limited. So it means that if we just make a kind of grouping to this trading in some countries, we just have, let's say, diversified trade and also concentrated trade. So when we talk about this kind of concentrated trade, it means that we have some of them, let's say this concentrated trade is only 40% of the shares for the global trade. So the global concentrations, it takes the share of around only 10%. So it means that with these global concentrations, they have a very few supply economies. So in the examples, like a kind of the supplier for the iron ore, or maybe laptops and also soybeans. And the rest of 30% for this concentrated trade, they have economic specified concentrations that the many supplier economies exist, but then each importers relies on only a few of them. Still, it means that in a kind of behavior, it is almost the same between global concentrations and economic specific concentrations. And for this, when we talk about this kind of friendshoring, we would like also to see, we do hope that this could be seen as a kind of play defense, not a kind of attack to the other economy. Because logically, the aim of friendshoring is to protect a country against interruptions in supply chains. Right? And then also whether it is caused by another country's aggressive actions or maybe unforeseen events such as a pandemic. And also using friendshoring in a defensive rather than aggressive way means focusing on strategic of the product. So it means that it will be a kind of refocusing or relocating about the product into the country that is also quite supportive and having a kind of quote unquote friends for our country. And also by contrast, using trade policy to damage certain countries' economy could provoke also a trade war. And this causes kind of disruptions, and friendshoring is intended to be prevented, right? And further, it would also heighten geopolitical tensions when the friendshoring is utilized in the way of a kind of aggressive approach. And also the same logic applies also to the companies. And companies like, let's say, Apple, for example, it is ramping up its iPhone productions in India, while it makes sense to cut its dependency to China, but it also doesn't make any possibility of making way to zero. It means that it is still combinations of them. And now, if I may also share the sectors that it is related with the interest of the United States, because United States sets strategy in productions and also supply of critical, high-tech and strategic products. And based on the research by Atlantic Council in last year, so we could see that these are the sectors that United States have already set the strategy on. So the first is semiconductors, and then also the second, telecom and 5G infrastructure, then equipment for green energy and transitions, and active pharmacy ingredients. And also, last but not least, is about strategic and critical minerals. And for those 5 sectors, I should say that Indonesia is having also close relations to this. Like, let's say, strategic and critical minerals, like as already mentioned by the previous speakers, that we have a strength point in the minerals resources in Indonesia. But we have also another strength in also a kind of fisheries and also industries for plantations, for example. And for this, we know that all the things have been done by the United States in order to make preparations to protect and also to prevent from the disruptions to the economy by having some policies for these 5 of main sectors. That's the things that we would like also to have a kind of good participations in this friendshoring of United States. Like, let's say, in strategic and critical minerals, for example, like electricity network and also batteries, mainly for electric vehicles. This will drive also around 75% of the demand of critical minerals by 2050. And Indonesia could be one of the suppliers, one of the best supplier for the United States for the market of EV in the United States, or even for the market outside of the United States that will be supplied by the batteries could be produced by Indonesia. And Indonesia is open not only for the United States, it means open also for other countries, because Indonesia is also economically open to any other partners of utilizing the natural resources that we have to be downstream into a better quality product to supply the demand of the global market. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just share with you then now about the Indonesia performance, about contributions of the FDI in the country. So if you could see here that FDI contributes around 50%, 54% to the total direct investment in Indonesia last year. And it is also shown that Indonesia is one of the top 20 destinations for investment or for FDI. We could see that last year in 2020, Indonesia was in the rank 15 as a destination for investment. And for 2022, we are on the 20th rank for this investment destinations. And this is also supported by the data that Indonesia managed to sustain investment growth. And we could see then from this data that from the year 2022, if we compare year to year, that it grew by 2.1%. And then by 2021, year-on-year comparisons, it grew by 9%. And direct investment growth for 2022, it increased by 34%. And for the 2022, we have reached our target by 100.6%. So it means that it is above the target that we have already designed. And this target was not based on the long-term planning designed by our national planning agencies, but it is also changed by the President Joko Widodo with the higher target. But still, then our office, thanks God, that we could also achieve the target that is already set by our president. And to see about the performance of investment in Indonesia, we could see that Indonesia is also supported by some of a growth of investment coming from some countries, and United States is also playing a very significant role, because for the last 4 years, starting from 2019 up to 2022, United States is always on the top 10 investors in Indonesia. And the latest positions by 2022, United States is on the top 6 of investors in Indonesia. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just share with you then, as I did mention, that Indonesia is very open for the investment in Indonesia. And because of this, let's say in the emphasizing on the EV ecosystems, we could see that Indonesia is rich with the natural resources, including the nickel ore. And we have the policy that we would like to make a kind of downstream industry of this nickel ore that is not only being utilized only for the stainless steel productions, but we would like also to utilize this nickel ore for other objective of being a part of global ecosystem for EV. And for this, we have the program of making the ecosystem of this EV battery in Indonesia, started from the nickel ore productions up to the recycle of the batteries. And because of this, we invited some countries to have their existence facilities of productions in Indonesia, like let's say Huayou from China, and then also we have BASF and also Eramet from France. And we have also Sumitomo from Japan. So it means that whoever the country that they have interest to work together with Indonesia, doing a kind of downstream industry in Indonesia, we are very happy to do so. And in order to create this kind of ecosystem in Indonesia, we are not forcing investors that they have to establish their battery sets in Indonesia and also recycle. We are going step by step. But at least for our policy now, we would like to have that the productions of precursors and cathode to be in Indonesia. And of course, it is with the special design of timeline that could be possible, that we do understand as well that markets will be provided by Indonesia with this policy. And also we open the possibility of export this to the rest of the world to supply at the manufacturing of battery for EV. And because of this, then we are very happy to invite United States companies that need also to have the productions of a battery for their EV industry. So Indonesia is welcoming also the United States, and we would like also to be a kind of partner for and on the friends of United States in supplying for these EV ecosystems. And now, ladies and gentlemen, based on the interest of United States with that 5 sectors, so I just would like to share with you with this slide that including strategic sector in United States friendshoring policy, mining and pharmaceutical is also 2 of these sectors that Indonesia has already been showing our close relations with the United States, because we could see that FDI realizations from the United States in Indonesia by sectors from 2018 to 2022, we could see that mining and chemical and pharma industry, they are on the top 5 of sectors that American investors doing investment in Indonesia. And these 2 is also included into the sectors of active pharmaceutical ingredients and also strategic and critical minerals. So this is the things that we would like to see that in the future, we have a very strong possible potential relations with the United States to set up this kind of a stronger relations of partnerships and also friend of shoring with this investment and supply to the United States of America and then also to the market of United States of America in the world. And ladies and gentlemen, now when we see a product related to the U.S. friendshoring strategic sector that we could see here, now that we could see that it covers around 41% of the total import, right? So we could see here that the largest import partners of the United States from the year 2021, they are China, Mexico, Canada, Japan, Germany, and Indonesia sits on the 20th. So we do hope that Indonesia could play also a more significant role so that the rank of Indonesia to be the partner for US in a better positions. And we do know that the situations right now, because we know that China and United States is not in very well situations in terms of economic relations. So we could see that something could be done for us to make a kind of a stable supply chains could be maintained for the stability of the world economy in trading and export and investment. So these are also the slide showing about Indonesia export product related to friendshoring strategic sectors in the United States. We could see here that Indonesia is also having the commodity that we export to the United States. So from all of this kind related with the sectors, we exported electronic equipment from Indonesia to the United States and also machineries, boilers, organic chemical, tin, aluminum, copper, and nickels. So it means that we are traditionally the suppliers of these products to the United States. So we do hope that we could also have a strong relations with the United States for this. And ladies and gentlemen, now I just would like to move on the thing that we know that United States is also through the USTR's proposed trade climate policy, creating a kind of a change to the US market access. So for trade climate agenda proposed by the United States representative or USTR by 2021, this is the things that we could see. So revive negotiations on the environmental goods agreement, and then also restore carbon sinks by negotiating trade obligations that protect forests and oceans, and also revise WTO subsidy rules to encourage investment in clean energy and carbon capture sequestrations or a CCS technology, and exercise restraint on the introductions of carbon border adjustment measures or CBAMs that is introduced by European Union. And especially when we talk about this carbon, I do like to have to share with you that we have also very strong ability to support this, because we have our potential to make a kind of carbon asset. And as a conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me just come into the last slide that we have. The last slide, please. So Indonesia is also having a kind of reason to be the friends of United States, because Indonesia and US are long time and strategic partners, and the second producer of a strategic product. Indonesia is a producer of strategic products that is needed by United States, and Indonesia US FTAs is potentially to be negotiated, and large and growing domestic and regional market to support also product coming from the United States. And we are competitive production factors. We are having competitive production factors. And last but not least, we improve investment climate to welcome investment coming from the United States and to work together with the United States to supply the need of the global market by our corporations. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that I could share with you. And back to Ria. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Nurul, for your
Mas Aryo, sorry. Thank you, Mas Aryo.
no worries. Thank you, Pak Nurul, for your amazing presentation, just as always, about recent development of Indonesia's performance on foreign direct investment, the priority of sector to attract investor, and also incentives. Also, Pak Nurul starts the presentation with a thought-provoking questions. Who is the friend anyway? Let me call the second speaker, Pak John Gardner, who may provide us with the answer. John, you have 20 minutes. The time is yours.
Thank you very much. Esther, Aryo, Pak Nurul, thank you very much for those presentations. Very excellent presentation from Pak Nurul. Very, very deep understanding of friendshoring. Greetings, Your Excellencies, and to all of you in both Indonesia and the United States. It is very good to be here with you all. I first met Pak Didi in 2002 during a visit to Jakarta when I was at USAID. So it's so good to connect with him once again and to meet all of you. Let us start with the broad picture. From the beginning of the Biden administration, there has been a very strong focus on Asia. A lot of people said he would focus more on Europe. And in fact, the focus has been in Asia. Prime Minister Suga from Japan was the first foreign visitor to the White House during the pandemic. The extra tariffs from the last administration on China remain in place. The Biden administration has taken actions against China, which it has termed a, quote, country of concern, unquote, in economic policy. Congress has enacted the CHIPS and Science Act to focus on semiconductors. The economic report of the president last year, 2022, focused on critical materials and minerals. And the president recently restricted exports of semiconductors with military applications to China. And now these sanctions will be joined in part by Japan and the Netherlands. In that context, last year, after the invasion of Ukraine and the heightened concerns over global supply chains coming out of the pandemic and the lockdowns in China, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's speech to the Atlantic Council on supply chain challenges invented a new term for this old idea, friendshoring. And we have to see this first as an alternative to reshoring, which is the idea of bringing all elements of a supply chain back to the United States, which is clearly impractical. It's impossible, in fact. And the other concept of nearshoring, which would mean for the US having all major elements of a supply chain located in the US or Canada or Mexico or the Caribbean, our very near neighbors. Friendshoring is meant to be a broad and flexible category. It is principally designed to encourage companies to move operations from countries such as China, where their supply chains are vulnerable to political and economic risk, to countries that are friends of the United States, where supply chains are more likely to be secure and reliable for both US and host country companies. Friendshoring is not limited to US treaty allies or countries with which the US has free trade agreements. It is for every country that believes in open trade, high standards, and open foreign investment from the United States. I believed this before I heard Pakunuro's speech, but I believe it even more now. There is no reason why Indonesia should not be the preeminent friendshoring destination for US investment in Asia. Indonesia offers many advantages: a vibrant democracy, a strong economy, a well-educated workforce, abundant natural resources, and growing experience in sophisticated manufacturing. And those are just a few of Indonesia's advantages. But to get there, Indonesia will need to build on its strengths in several areas. First is the question of standards, as Western standards in an area like telecommunications are often in competition with standards promoted by other countries such as China. So Indonesia will need to align better on standards in important industries, taking advantage of such tools as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the Blue Dot Network, or the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, which is designed to promote what the administration terms high standards and quality investments in resilient infrastructure, unquote, that will themselves boost Indonesia's economic growth and global competitiveness. In critical minerals, the Mineral Security Partnership, not just the US, but also Europe and a number of the industrialized Asian countries, and that's a similar effort. So on standards, think of industries such as telecommunications and issues such as labor and environmental protection. Indonesia will need, therefore, to participate more actively in global standard-setting bodies with an aim to attract further foreign investment in these high technology industries by supporting relevant standards, which will help Western and particularly American companies make the decision to invest in Indonesia. And Indonesia will also need to understand how best to use these groups to attract foreign investments. And next, Indonesia will need to explain its supply chains for foreign investors much more deeply. No investor wants to make an investment thinking that it is outside of China, only to discover later that other elements of the supply chain for that investment still depend on China. And that is why President Joko Widodo's initiatives on this downstreaming are so important, to build more of those supply chains within Indonesia and give American investors the reassurance they need that investing in Indonesia will be a resilient and robust supply chain. Because resilience of supply chains is really the concept that underlies the whole friendshoring initiative. And as Indonesia seeks to do more at home under the president's initiatives, this is a very strong signal to foreign investors that Indonesia offers resilient and robust domestic supply chains that are themselves the attraction for a foreign partner, for an American company to want to make the investment in Indonesia, or to look to Indonesia as an importer of goods that it will need to make a finished product in the United States. I think it can really work both ways. We believe these goals are achievable with the right framework in place to get there. And some of Indonesia's competitors are already taking steps to align with this friendshoring program. For instance, last year, Malaysia and the United States signed a memorandum of cooperation on semiconductors to strengthen the partnership between the governments and the semiconductor industry in both countries, and aim to increase transparency and trust, as well as promote investment in the semiconductor supply chain. Last year, Congress enacted the Chips and Science Act, $52.7 billion in investment in semiconductors. Most of that is in subsidies to actually build fabrication plants in the United States. But those plants are not the entire semiconductor supply chain. And that's where a country like Indonesia can come in, partner with the companies that are seeking to take advantage of those new initiatives and be that resilient partner in supply chains as a friend in friendshoring in that critical area of semiconductors, which Pak Nurul mentioned. I believe Indonesia should try to obtain a similar agreement on semiconductors and also seek to highlight these other areas of strong interest to the United States, including clean energy technology, critical materials, and healthcare in all its aspects. Precursor chemicals for pharmaceuticals are very important, but I think there's more opportunity for trade as well in medical devices, in pharmaceuticals, in other aspects of the healthcare industries. And this is all at the heart of friendshoring. Finding the right US partners who can take advantage of Indonesia's strengths as these US companies seek to diversify their supply chains. I was also asked to speak as well on the Inflation Reduction Act, which Congress passed last year, which Aryo mentioned earlier. The law has provisions on tax and on healthcare, and is expected to reduce the federal deficit over 10 years by almost 240 billion US dollars. But the most important sections of the bill are on the green economy. It is quite simply the largest piece of climate change legislation in US history. This law will spend up to $384 billion on provisions relating to climate and energy. Most of this, $271 billion, is in the form of tax credits that will be available to companies taking advantage of the act, though the money also includes some direct grants and loans as well. There is a direct focus on clean energy production and incentives for adoption of cleaner energy sources of all types. These tax incentives apply to sources including nuclear, biodiesel, an area of tremendous strength for Indonesia, and renewable diesel fuel, as well as to other zero carbon sources. The bill also includes tax provisions related to building cleaner buildings, to personal vehicles, including a $7,500 credit for new electric vehicles and a $4,000 credit for used ones, commercial vehicles, and agriculture, as well as for investments in the domestic manufacturing of clean energy products such as solar panels or batteries. These Made in America provisions for clean energy production apply to wind, solar, nuclear, clean hydrogen, clean fuels, and carbon capture. And they pay a bonus to businesses that pay US workers a prevailing wage and use registered apprenticeship programs so that we can train our own workforce for the green economy. And there are about $30 billion in total production tax credits in that provision of the law, including a $10 billion investment tax credit for clean technology manufacturing facilities, up to 20 billion in loans for our car companies to switch how they make automobiles, and other types of provisions. But these Made in America provisions on batteries for electric vehicles in particular have already caused some tensions with some of our allies, notably with South Korea and with the European Union, all of which shows the importance of supply chains, which is now another critical focus of the Act. And I would also add, before I leave this section, that with the incentives in the law, the US will now be the lowest cost producer of clean hydrogen in the world, which is really quite something, especially given the major investments we've seen in that area from Japan and South Korea. Overall, the administration estimates that the climate provisions will reduce overall climate change damages to the US economy by 1.9 trillion, and that they will reduce our carbon emissions by roughly 40% by 2030, getting us most of the way there to the president's goal of a 52% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 based on based on levels from 2005, all as a part of the goal of getting to net zero by 2050 under the terms of the Paris agreement. So if all the incentives are used, we would see total greenhouse gas emissions from the US down by about 1 gigaton, 1 billion metric tons by 2030. The IRA will promote decarbonization by increasing demand for electric vehicles and clean technologies, increasing demand for renewable energy, promoting R&D and clean technology and low carbon materials, not all of which has to be done in the United States, promoting use of low carbon materials and transportation products. And as a part of this, a very important purpose of the act was to encourage US businesses to take another look at their carbon use and think about ways that moving towards decarbonization can help their own revenue growth, not just through tax incentives, but through other efforts. And so I believe this law will help many companies reduce not only their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions over time, but actually their scope 3 emissions as well. And I think that's an area where Indonesia can become very important as a country that is measuring scope 3 emissions and can help the US. And then one of the ways that an Indonesian company can partner with the US is that kind of reliable mechanism, that kind of reliable measurement of scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, which will very likely have to become reported over the next several years for American companies, at least publicly owned companies. So where does Indonesia fit in here? To obtain the full tax credit for electric battery production, at least 40% of the materials must be made in the US or in countries with which the US has a free trade agreement. This is what's getting the South Koreans so upset, because they'd like to import the finished batteries and have a US company get a tax credit. That can't happen right now. And this percentage will rise to 80% by 2027. But to say that 60% of the materials can come from outside the US or those FTA countries still leaves a lot of room for Indonesian companies to work with US companies as partners to help them get the tax credit. And I was so pleased to see at the end of Pak Nurul's presentation, putting on the table for us all to consider and to work towards this wonderful idea of a US-Indonesia FTA, which would vault Indonesia into the ranks not only of friends in terms of friendshoring, but an actual FTA partner with the United States that could take advantage of these types of incentives more directly. And as Pak Nurul said, the administration wants to see supply chains for critical materials and for green technology, like solar panels, move from China to other countries, including in Southeast Asia. So I believe there are real opportunities for Indonesian companies to find American partners and to work to help them to take advantage of these tax credits. And I also believe, of course, that American companies need to take a very close look at Indonesia as an ideal friendshoring partner in these areas of the green economy and telecommunications and critical minerals and semiconductors, where our two countries working together can contribute so much. I believe very strongly that by working together, we can strengthen the global value chain of both Indonesia and the United States, attract more foreign investment to Indonesia, and show the world that Indonesia, now the 10th largest economy in the world in purchasing power parity terms, should be considered at the top of the list for US friends should be considered at the top of the list among U.S. economic friends in Asia and around the world, in good times and in more challenging times, such as we have seen in the last several years. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak teman-teman saya.
Thank you, John. You provided us with great points about the U.S. Friendshoring. The focus of the Biden administration is to Asia rather than to other regions. It's also been answered that friendshoring is open to all countries that has the same value of the U.S. John also mentioned several important points, like Indonesia need to build with the standardization of industry, labor, and environment that have become business concerns. Let's now invite our third panelist, Pak Rosan, to share his thoughts on this topic through video tapping, since he attended the President's State of the Union. Ria, please play Pak Rosan's video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good morning dan selamat pagi Jakarta time. The Minister of Investment and also my good friend, Bapak Bahlil Lahadalia, Ibu Esther Sri Astuti, Program Director of INDEF, Daniel With, President of ETIC, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be a part of this morning webinar discussion how Indonesia can attract more foreign investment through the U.S. policy of Friendshoring and the Inflation Reduction Act or IRA. I'm confident that this seminar is the ideal platform to express my thought on this topic. I want to extend my gratitude to INDEF for hosting this webinar and convey my message that Indonesia is a strategic choice for the U.S. to establish a resilient supply chain for electric battery vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to observe the strong and cordial cooperation between Indonesia and the U.S., which boasts over 70 years of diplomatic relations. Indonesia and the U.S. are close partners on a variety of issues, and the partnership has been elevated to a strategic partnership since 2015. In terms of economic cooperation, Indonesia and U.S. have been a remarkable accomplishment in trade and investment. The figures speak for themselves. Our trade reached 44.5 billion US dollar in 2022, displaying an 18.23% increase compared to 2021. Last year, the US was the sixth largest contributor of foreign direct investment to Indonesia, with a total of 3.02 billion US dollar. In short, the US may not be Indonesia's largest trading partner, but it is undoubtedly the best. Honorary guests and distinguished participants, despite the impressive achievement and a promising future for economic cooperation, there is still much room for growth in two-way trade and investment between Indonesia and the US. I would like to see more trade and investment flows between the two countries. Given the above facts, I'm confident in saying that Indonesia fits the criteria of being a friendshore for the US in terms of diversifying its supply chains. In addition, Indonesia is one of the founding members of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or IPEF, which was launched in May 2022 alongside the US. The IPEF emphasizes shared values between Indonesia and the US, such as promoting economic growth while benefiting workers and reducing greenhouse gas emission. I'm certain that supporting the electric vehicles ecosystem is one way to embody these values. The Inflation Reduction Act provides incentive for procuring EVs assembled in the US, and Indonesia is proud to be a part of this supplying electric batteries. Indonesia is eager and delighted to work with the US in accordance with the spirit of the IRA and in line with Indonesia's chairmanship in ASEAN this year. Distinguished participants, electric battery play a crucial role in electric vehicle components, accounting for up to 40% of the total production cost. Indonesia boasts abundant reserve of nickel, cobalt, bauxite, copper, and tin, key component for electric vehicles. Indonesia produced 47% of the world nickel ore in 2022 and has the largest nickel ore reserve. Manufacturing costs are a significant concern, but Indonesia offers some of the lowest manufacturing costs in Asia due to low labor and industrial power prices. Labor and electricity costs make up 6% of the total cost of the electric batteries. Lower manufacturing costs mean electric vehicles can be sold at a more competitive price, which in turn affects the amount of tax incentive provided by the US government. Investment in the upstream minerals sector in Indonesia will add a value to raw materials by manufacturing them into battery cathodes, which can then be exported to the US for assembly into electric batteries. This benefits both countries by creating opportunities and demonstrating tangible cooperation. Let us take advantage of this opportunity to boost US-Indonesia relation through the manufacturing of electric battery vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Rosan, who had shared some points on the US-Indonesia historic partnerships. The ambassador also mentioned that Indonesia is a strategic partner for global supply chain on EV and many other green energy components. Indonesia also founding of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is important to reap benefits from the recent policy from the US government. And let's now invite our last panelist, Mbak Asia, to share her thoughts on this topic. The time is yours, Mbak Esa.
Okay, thank you, Aryo, for your kind introductions. Good morning, Pak Nurul. It's nice to meet you here, Pak Nurul, and John, and also Dan. Nice to meet you here. And then also to Mbak Esa, Prof. Didik, and also Pak Rosan, and also Pak Bahlil, who will later join with us. And then for today, as our previous panelist has already comprehensively explaining about what is potential benefits for Indonesia through the friendshoring, and then from US side also John has mentioned about what is all about the friendshorings in general and also for specifics potential for Indonesia. And now I am going to explore more about can Indonesia boost investment through friendshorings? And I would like to explore what are the opportunities and also what are the challenges for Indonesia. And let me share my screen and my presentation in here. Okay. Is it clearly here? Yeah. Okay. So I would like begin with the background that is we have already know that after pandemic we have it will it will disrupt the present international trade and also global supply chains in here. If we look at to the export by countries on the left side, we have a comparison between 2019 and 2020, when the onset of the pandemic in here. We see that because of the contagious pandemic, then China have lockdown, and then it disrupt their production manufacturing. So it also impact to their exports. And over the years, you can see even though there is a recovery in economic exports, we can see here there is volatility also by China export. Why? Because China imposed zero COVID lockdown. So that we know that a global supply chain are depending so much on the supply from China. Then when it lockdowns, it also disrupt all the supply parts and components to all over the world. And then we can see the changes on exports in here. There are significantly changes on value of fuels and cars exports to the global world. which is decreasing as about $1,200 billion, while they are shifting to the other exports, such as integrated circuits and then minerals and medicines, also growth in between 2019 and 2020. But then, if we look at to the China export again, there are significantly numbers of export from China by products. If we look at from 2022 comparing to the last year, 2021, since in this period, China still imposes zero COVID policy, that means they would like to suspend even when there is a lockdown, that it also impact on the export of their electronic product machineries. If we look at here, 35% changes in growth of their exports to the world. And this disruptions and global change makes other countries thinking that we have to cut the dependencies on the tight global supply chain from the China. But then when the pandemic still in recovery, we have still seeing a lot of geopolitical tensions between Ukraine and Russia that makes the energy price skyrocketed, and it is still forecasted to remain high in the near future, in the 1 or 2 years ahead. Still the price of oils and also gas still not going back to the earlier level, and then it makes inflations, so food prices increasing, and also it is impact on the slowdown. And if we look at to the global positions of trade, we still have U.S. and China tensions among the trade. If we look at the indicator here, it's still volatiles, even though if there's something going on, then U.S. and China will, it is going further tension. Then, as I mentioned before, to tackle these supply chain disruptions, nowadays, some countries are more thinking to consider more regionalisms rather than depending so much on China. And then one of them are US. The US is one of policy to friendshoring, giving incentives, initiatives to subsidies and for import substitution. And one is relocation production to their allies to integrate the supply chain that we have already listened to previous panelists, that these relocation productions are having to get benefits for the allies. So these are some of the one of types of friendshoring initiative that are US release for now, and there are many others if we look to explore about that. First is that to encourage the manufacturing semiconductors, and then the IRR, the Inflation Reduction Act, that is an incentive to climate change energy security that John has mentioned about the tax credit for manufacturing producing in the US, 40%, and then we have 60% opportunities producing this production of EV, for example,
And then this kind of incentive will be in such, I think, quite long, until 2035 or 2031. So we still have time to explore, to get the benefits, to be partnering with these mechanisms, these procedures. And then the other things that maybe possibly we can to be part of this friendshoring initiatives is that Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity that is mentioned by His Excellency ambassadors. This is Indonesia, one of part of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, along with other Asian economics in this kind of framework. So I would like to explore more. So who will benefits from the, who will benefits from the shift import, U.S. import from China to other countries? If we look at to the growth of the U.S. import origins before, from 2018 to 2021, we look at here, Vietnam increasing 100%, more than 100%. So I compare before pandemic to 2021. Then we look at other Asian economies like Taiwan, Malaysia, Thailand, India, and Indonesia as well, increase about 32%. So this is potentially growth for these countries, this partner, U.S. partner, because they export their product to U.S. And then what kind of products they export to U.S., it is much more about machinery, appliance, and then electrical machinery, vehicles, pharmaceutical products. That also, we have also listened to Pak Nurul about the strategies or potential strategic import, U.S. import to be potentially to be our our exporting. And then since this IRI and then also friendshoring initiatives, so many companies in the US, when they are producing in US, they are also planning to relocate their production to the partners, the partner FTA partners, to get some kind of tax credit that is in the framework of IRA. This is the potential investment that are relocated in the countries such as Latin America, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil. So we look at here, most of them are EV supply chain, component, and PV and EV manufacturing. So when the US implement this kind of IRA, so it promotes companies to invest in this kind of countries to get the tax credits, which is they would like to implement this kind of investment within the next years to this year's and next year's until 2025. And then this kind of potential that may bring to their neighboring countries, the America, such as Mexico, Brazil, and also Argentina. But then other than that, US has many partnering, right? And not only Latin America, but also in the Asia countries that we have also know in the earlier slides that I mentioned about ASEAN, Taiwan. And if we look at the Asian countries, the shares of Asian countries in the imports, we look at here are dominantly by Vietnam. But then Indonesia, it's among five major or six major partner. But look deep down into what are they exporting to US. Particularly, we find that Thailand and Vietnam export some kind of more electrical products, such as a computer and then telephone and then office machines. And this we look at here, this kind of more value and technological value added export coming from Thailand to the United States. What I seeing in here that Thailand and Vietnam could reap benefits to this kind of initiative, friendshoring initiative within, if we look comparing within the Asian countries. But then we look at the Indonesia. Indonesia export commodities to US. US is one of our prominent partner for export, Indonesian export. This is the second largest partners for Indonesian export. But here now we look at the still Indonesian export are dominantly by products origin from like just palm oil. And then this is the growth from 2019 and 2021. Here we can see that there is a huge windfall in commodities price. So Indonesian exports still now dominantly by commodities. Here we see more deeper that potentially in textile and also commodities such as palm oil, fishery products, and also a forestry product in here. And then we look at Indonesia in the whole exports Indonesia to the world. Indonesia still produce or export such commodity-based products, which is such as palm oil, coal, and natural rubber. But in terms of complexity, meaning that Indonesia has this is a negative value, palm oil and then coal. It's meaning that low complexity products of Indonesian exports. So here we need to have more effort to downstreaming these resources, since we have a lot of abundance of natural resources. So then the potential growth for Indonesia based on the research from the growth lab, we see that there are some kind of new product to explore, which is we can see on the right diagram. We have electronic integrated circuits, semiconductor parts for motor vehicle, and also cars. This kind of Indonesian potential growth by the opportunity gain that we can push to be more produced in Indonesia, because the more we can produce more complex products, we can get more growth for our income. And we have economic structural transformation vision for 2045 that we need to move into high income countries by 2045. So this is the background that we need to promote more downstreaming in our industry from resource base. So we need more investment on it, because this kind of diversifying products to be more complex and high value added export need more. We need more technology, we need more capitals, and then by this we have to attract investment. And one of the potential we can go through is that relocation production and friendshoring that we already discussed here. And this is one we can potentially explore in here. But then we have challenges, some of kind of challenges, because the program's initiative in one of the friendshoring's program is to promote sustainable energy in the US, so they can promote more investment in the US, and then the US company can attract or another partner, another allies, for example, Mexico, and it's also Indonesia, to produce or to supply parts and component, and we can to be part of that kind of supply chain. Then we need more commitment to implement sustainable energy, because now we still highly dependent on that. And then we also hear John mentioning that there should be a FTA with the US if we would like to support the components or for clean energies in the US through the FTA between that countries with US. So now we do not have FTA with the US, but still we can exploring some possibilities and mechanisms in which we can go through, for example, IPEF that I have mentioned, and also the ambassadors said about that, whether this can boost the investment in Indonesia to be the part of the supply chain supporting the US clean energy manufacturing. And then the last thing is from our side, we need to boost our productivity, our quality, our macroeconomic conditions, so that we can attract more investment, and also we need to produce higher standard and quality to meet the global markets. And I think so far this is my presentation. I would like to give it back to the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Aisha, for your insights, which mentioned that it's clear the pandemic disrupts international trade and global supply chain, and it's been getting worse due to the increasing of global geopolitical tension from the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Mbak Aisha also mentioned some recent derivative from friendshoring, such as chips and science art, which focus on chips making industry, Defense Production Act, and Inflation Reduction Act. Mbak Aisha also share important presentation who wins from the friendshoring from US imports origins growth and potential investment from planned relocation, which is mostly to the US next door, Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil. Mbak Aisha also provide us with interesting trade data that shows that Vietnam and Thailand had real benefits from the US-China rivalry. Ladies and gentlemen, now we've come to the Q&A or discussion sessions. Let's open up for the floor for questions from the audience. We have several questions from the chat feature here. We have Pak Budiko Sumaningdija. He asks about whether Indonesia can take advantage or reap benefits from the US-China rivalry as specifically on some flagships commodities like nickel. I've asked also Pak Budi, and he mentioned that these questions for all the speakers. Maybe Pak Nurul can provide us with the answer whether Indonesia can reap benefit from the US and China rivalry. Please, Pak Nurul.
Right, thank you, Mas Aryo. Amazing witnessing of all the panelists' presentations. I learned a lot from Pak John and Mbak Asia as well. So I guess for this time, when it is questions whether or not we could take a kind of advantage, Pak Budi asks about because of US and China rivalry. So I guess this should be seen more on the business aspects. So it means that when the rivalry is there, it means that now we could see that both countries, they are looking for the new friends. And Indonesia could be friends of the United States. And we are also having no problem with China. So in this case, we are currently in a natural situations that we have no specific interest on being to be on the American sides more or on the China's more. So this is something that we could see as a kind of possibility of United States investor in choosing Indonesia as destination country. I should say that it should be seen on that way because I underline a statement coming from John Gardner, because we have to be a country that is able to produce qualified or quality products to be exported to the United States or to attract investment from the United States to be exported to other country of the world. So in this case, it is not as simple as seeing that they would like to, let's say, relocate their business from China to other countries, or they would like to see other potential countries exporter for the market of United States. Even though that United States is looking for alternative exporter, if then Indonesia is not able to provide good quality product that is required for the market of the United States. When we talk about this kind of good quality product, it means that it is not about the quality of the product itself, but the process of producing this product that will also be supplied by green energy, for example, and also protecting the environment with other processing procedures that we have. So this possibility, I should say, is very highly open for Indonesia. But now then, this openness should be a response, as also Mbak Aisa mentions as well, that it should be also supported by the way of improvement in the quality of product that could be produced or provided by Indonesia. So in this case then, I should see that instead of only looking for the possibility of Indonesia to be the supplier to the United States, we could see that now opening the opportunities of working together between the United States to work together with Indonesia to produce something with a better quality in Indonesia to supply United States and also other rest of the world market of United States. And because of this, then the thing that we could offer to them as a kind of supporting aspects for producing this well-quality product is about the availability of manpower, the availability of logistic supply chains, and also the availability of raw materials that could be combined with the technology and capital coming from the United States. So this is something that I should see for Indonesia to offer to the United States. So we are offering as Indonesia as a partner or as a friend of producing something to supply the need of the market of the United States, or to supply the rest of the world by the product of United States that is also combined with Indonesia collaborations. Mas Arya.
Thank you, Manolo. Let me call John. What do you think? Whether Indonesia can take over China's export opportunity? We can see that the U.S. and China's rivalry, I think, have become opportunity for Indonesia. Please, John.
Let me make some comments, if I may. The first is specifically about nickel. And I think Indonesia's challenge on nickel is that right now 43% of imports into the United States of nickel come from Canada, particularly the province of Ontario. And so much of that nickel is used in the automotive industry. And ever since the Auto Pact in 1965 between President Johnson and Prime Minister Pearson, we have had very tightly integrated binational supply chains between a lot of the plants in Michigan and Indiana and Ohio and the plants in Ontario. So that becomes a challenge. Now, 30% of the imports come from, other countries. There's Canada, there's Finland, Norway, and then Australia, and then there are a variety of other countries. So yes, I think there is the possibility to raise the nickel imports, but that is the particular challenge because so much of that comes from Canada. Now, to the general question about China. I spoke earlier of resilient supply chains and robust supply. There is a third R word here as well, which is redundant. Some American companies, they may or they may not want privately to leave China, but they may not be doing so immediately for a variety of reasons, either very low labor costs, and if labor cost is their principal issue, they might look at Vietnam or some other countries, but they would be looking for redundant supply chains, and not just, oh, is China going to invade Taiwan, or oh, will there be another lockdown or something like that, but simply a sense of trying to plan for their own businesses. As we have seen so much trade bifurcate into these geopolitical blocks, the companies are saying, we may want to have redundancy in our supply chains. So that too is an opportunity for Indonesia. Yes, what we have been talking about mostly this evening are these wonderful opportunities to develop real close partnerships throughout the value chain with Indonesia downstreaming production in its own domestic supply chains, and the United States looking for new partners and try to come together and have a very good, deep economic partnership. Yes, that's what we're really talking about. But with respect to China, and yes, and some of that trade will be companies that have left China for whatever reason. But I also think there are opportunities in some industries where the US may want to diversify so that it purchases some from China and some from countries like Indonesia, which gets to the point that both Pak Nurul and I have made about standards. Whether we're talking about something like 5G or 6G in telecommunications, whether we're talking about standards for clean energy production, getting those standards through things like the Blue Dot Initiative, I think is very important in having Indonesia be seen to be a more attractive destination for foreign investment, because they know that what they are getting is not only of a high quality in terms of the product, but when I am thinking of standards, I am thinking of product standards, international product standards, so that it flows naturally into these Western supply chains. So I hope that's helpful to your questioner.
Thank you, John. After this, Mbak Asia, and I would like to extend the questions not only about whether Indonesia can reap benefits from the US, China, or foreign, also what are the challenges and the challenge from the government of Indonesia to reap those benefits. Over to you, Mbak Asia.
Okay, thank you, Aryo. I think the first question has already explained clearly from Pak Nurul and also John, but then I just would like to highlight that from my presentation previously, I have already displayed and shows you that the potential diversification from Indonesian product are already matched with the needs from the US initiative for such as EV, clean energies, such as like that. And then from the resources, we have abundant resources that can be produced into those kind of diversified products. But then when this friendshoring initiative comes into the tables, and then there are so many economies or countries that are willing to get those kind of cake also to be partnering with the manufacturing in the US, then we have so many competitor, and because of this, we have to be more competitive with this kind their competitors. So talking about competitions, to be more competitive, then we have to be prepare ourselves to be more productive, such which I have already mentioned before, and then Nurul also elaborate. We have to be more productive, and we have to be reach that kind of standard of quality of the products. And for the second question from you, Aryo, what are policies or something that government needs to do to tackle this kind of challenge? I think first is that the policy related to this kind of investment favorables to produce this kind of products should be implemented. First, for example, whether the environment and then environment sustainability and how to conduct environment friendly production in here, and then also the incentives for investment coming to the Indonesia. For example, if there are opportunity to produce more kind of highly complex product that give more value added so that we can export to our partners, it will be beneficial for the investors to come into Indonesia. I think probably that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Aisha, for your response. We also have questions on the chat feature from Mbak Shinta. I think it's the same questions, just like the previous questions. And we also have a question from Ibu Natalia. The questions, are there any US companies interested in building an electric car ecosystem in Indonesia? If not, what are the challenges? I think the question can be answered from Pak Nurul. Please, Pak Nurul.
Thank you, Mas Arya. So, so far, if it is asked based on the license that is issued by our office here, so far we haven't got any applications coming from the United States companies of doing this investment in Indonesia. But then, if let's say you are asking about what are the things that make them having or not having the interest yet of doing investment in Indonesia, I guess the answer of John previously mentioning that the neighboring country having close distance relations is having a kind of significant role in making decisions for them in doing investment. Like, let's say, if they know that the nickel could be imported from Canada, and why should United States import from Indonesia? If they have to import from Indonesia, then Indonesia should have something that will make the nickel from Indonesia is more competitive compared to Canada. I guess that's the logic considerations that is taken by United States company. But then maybe the thing that we have to think about, the possibility of growing market that is a bit far away from the United States, that Indonesia could play the role to be the partner for the United States and to be a kind of facilities for the productions of United States to supply to the regions that is close to Indonesia. It means that logistically, and also based on the raw materials providing by Indonesia, could be the significant contributors that United States then finally could choose Indonesia to be the destinations for their productions. So it means that when we talk about whether or not United States having a kind of interest doing investment in EV, let's say in Indonesia, it is not just because of United States having no interest in Indonesia. It is just because of efficiently, then they choose the country that is close to them, and they could control these productions with a huge range of control. So I guess that's the considerations. So it means that it is too early for us to say and to conclude that America has no interest of doing that investment in EV in Indonesia. So it is depending on the next 10 years, the growing of the EV market in the regions that is more efficiently could be taken by their facility inside of the regions. So I guess that is something that we have to understand.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that it's a question. Good Natalia asked the question about ecosystem, and I would respond, it's about components, because particularly given the structure of the tax credit in the Inflation Reduction Act, where it's 40% has to be made in US or a free trade agreement country now, 80% by 2027, a company making a long-term investment in electric battery production is going to be saying, how do we take advantage of that tax credit? But can there be components that are part of that 60% or part of that 20%? I would answer yes. And I think that that's part of Indonesia's job, and the job of Indonesian companies is to show American manufacturers how this does make sense. That in fact, Indonesia can compete with other countries that are trying to do the same thing. I mean, it's one thing to talk about raw nickel, it's another thing to talk about components. You know, there's another area that came to mind here as well, which is, we've been talking so much about the automotive sector, and that's very true. There is tremendous interest in the United States right now on the subject of sustainable aviation fuel. Now, I know that that is obviously a very local market for obvious reasons. You're not going to transport SAF across the Pacific or the Atlantic or something like that. But here is an area where Indonesia has done a tremendous amount of research. Here is an area where our big three airlines are investing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in trying to make sustainable aviation fuel economic and practical to meet their own climate change goals. They're not just doing it because of the tax incentives. That, I mean, that's, of course, any company wants a tax incentive, but they have their own environmental goals because they see their customers saying, flying, bad for the environment. Maybe I'll just send an email or have a webinar. So they want to be able to say, no, we're using SAF. So I see that as an opportunity for Indonesian global leadership in a clean energy technology that is important to the United States, important to the planet, and as a way for Indonesia to really mark itself out as a leader in clean energy production and clean energy technology generally. So even though it may not be directly relevant to the US, except if, you know, our airlines buy the fuel when their aircraft are in Asia, then I would think about that area as well.
Okay, thank you, John. And I'll stick with you. Questions. By working only with friends, will all the companies' sourcing needs be met? For example, critical raw materials may not exist only in friendly countries. John, can you respond that? By working with only friends, will all the companies' sourcing needs be met?
It's a very complicated question. And let me start by talking about a phrase that we hear sometime, rare earth minerals. Rare in one sense, and certainly true that China currently dominates the production of these minerals that are important for things like cellular telephones and rocket engines and these very highly advanced technologies. But there are other countries, including the United States, including, countries in Africa, countries in Asia, that have supplies of rare earth and critical materials. From the perspective of an American company, yes, it would be possible to say, I only want to have a supply chain. Obviously, with Russia, now we have sanctions on the Russian Federation for most goods. I can see some companies wanting to say, yes, we really do want to take our supply chains out of China and only rely on friends. But that raises two problems. One is simply deciding what is economic in that area. And the second was something I alluded to earlier, that nobody wants to make an investment in a country and then discover, oh, you mean 3 steps earlier in the process that is still dependent on the same factory in China? Then they have not really diversified the supply chains. Now, whether we're talking about semiconductors, whether we're talking about apparel, whatever we're talking about, that consideration comes forward, which is why I made the point that a part of a successful friendshoring strategy for Indonesia will be to know and explain to foreign investors its supply chains as to why, or if you invest in Indonesia, that won't happen. Now, maybe there might be a precursor chemical that involves Singapore or something that involves another country in the region or something like that, but at least it wouldn't be in China. And that's really the approach that I look at this. Obviously, very individual decisions for different companies, but for many industries, it should be possible, if they wish, and if it becomes economic, to use friendshoring and nearshoring with the NAFTA with the North American countries as a strategy.
Thank you, John. We have questions from I'm not sure Indra or Ibu Indra from Bank Indonesia at the New York. He mentioned that he believed there are so many challenges for friendshoring to happen, such as geopolitics, political stability, infrastructure, labor market, technology. Thus, for the US to have friendshoring with Indonesia, because of this challenge, what are the key issues and challenges to be addressed first for friendshoring to happen in the future? I think this question I will address to Mbak Esa, which have mentioned on her presentation. Would you please respond and elaborate the points?
Okay, thank you, Aryo. Thank you, Pak Indra from BI New York. I would like to address your question about if we would like to friendshoring or partnering with the US to support their this initiative. I think one of the initiative or one of the effort is that to be close to partnering with US or companies in US, whether there are possibilities that we can kind of have a partner or strong cooperations to get some kind of investment and also to be part of this kind of ecosystems that John and Pak Nurul have mentioned about, meaning that this kind of effort, I think probably not really instantly could be possible, but we can have the effort to get this kind of possibility by probably we try to find what kind of mechanism or economic framework that we can to be the partners. And then secondly, we have also already know that there are some kind of framework, IPF. Probably through this framework, we can get to get these benefits. And then secondly, we can also promote ourselves. I mean, get this kind of incentive from the investors who would like to producing to be in the parts of company ecosystems to export this kind of product that is needed to be in this friendshoring initiative products. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Mbak Aisha. And we also have a question to John from Pak Didik Jarahbini. As been raised by Bu Indra from New York. USA has been friend in investment activities since 67, such as Freeport, Chevron, and more than half century. In terms of geopolitics, history, etc., Pak Didik thinks this is a good foundation for US Indonesia to implement friendshoring policy. So what are your thoughts, John, about Pak Didik concerns?
It is an excellent foundation. I mean, in terms of geopolitics and political stability, Indonesia is a democracy. I mean, Indonesia has a growing and better educated workforce. I mean, I think investors come in all different types. There are some who simply want the lowest cost production. Fine. Okay, that's one type of investor. But other types of investors, particularly in the technology areas, these 5 areas that Pak Nurul spoke about and other areas, I think it is attractive to have a country that is politically stable with a well-educated workforce that can think for itself. And that is a tremendous advantage for Indonesia. I think it is a very good foundation on which to build. And I also think the history of companies such as he mentioned, such as Chevron and Freeport and others, Nike, who have invested heavily in Indonesia, provide a good base to kind of tell that story to other American companies. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so positive about all this, because I think we have that foundation. And then, geopolitics, I don't see as a challenge. I think, in fact, geopolitics raises the need for the US to have deeper and closer ties with ASEAN and the countries of ASEAN. Now, I understand, there is a sense of balance in between the US and China, and that's fine. And I think that's understood. But as Secretary Blinken, our Secretary of State, said in 2021, we have half the trade relations with ASEAN as a whole that we do with China. And that is significant, because I don't think that fact is generally known in the US business community. And if you take that perspective and you say, rather than it's China is up here and everybody else is down here, if it's China's here and ASEAN's here, all of a sudden the world looks very different, and the geopolitics of this look very different. And there are these countries with whom we generally have very good and close relations, and who offer really strong investment opportunities. And I think within that group, Indonesia's story is particularly compelling. So I would completely agree with Pak Didik about this. The US needs ASEAN. ASEAN needs the US, and we've got a good foundation on which to build with respect to Indonesia.
Thank you, John. Next week.
Arya, may I just add something?
Sure, Pak Nurul, please.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe from the Indonesian perspective, something that we have to aware about is not only looking at a single perspective between Indonesia and United States, and especially at the leaderships of Indonesia for the ASEAN. So something that we have to know and we have to aware deeply about is in ASEAN, it is a country, a group of countries and associations of countries, but at the same time, we are also competing one another. So when we talk about relations between United States and ASEAN countries, it should be seen as well for Indonesian perspective, how competitive Indonesia, how competitive we are compared to, let's say, Vietnam, Thailand, or Malaysia, or the Philippines, for example. So this is something that have to be understood correctly by us. If then say, we make a kind of FTA with the United States, for example, up until now, we haven't had any, right? If I'm not mistaken. So one of the way for us in order to get the access to be, let's say, friend of the United States for this, we have to make this FTA. But by having this FTA, it is not a single medicine in making relations or making opportunities for us to be realistic, to get the access to the market of the United States or investment coming from the United States. But something that we have to think of about is Indonesia having the capacity in being a partner or being a producer or supplier that we match with the standard. And when we talk about the standard, if it is then broken down into more detailed aspects, so we are thinking about how Indonesia could supply the energy with the renewable energy. And when we talk about energy, it is already mentioned that by Pak John that SAF economy, for example, because when we talk about the airline business, airlines from United States, they could fly from one country to the other, including to Indonesia, or including to some countries in neighboring country. If we have the capacity, we have the quality, we have the technology to produce the sustainable aviation fuel, then we could support American business in this airline by supplying this fuel to the neighboring country where the United States airlines flying to these countries. So we have to make a kind of the possibility wider with the possible nearby business to support United States businesses. So this is also something. So it means that by mentioning this, and I just would like to say that, look, we have a very serious, big homework to be done, not only by the government, but also by the private sectors. If then our mindset only thinking about trading, we don't want to have the manufacturing capacity and facilities in Indonesia, then forget about supplying this product to the United States. Because we are only having a concern that the technology, that the capacity and the ability to produce something in Indonesia, sometimes it is just on the second priority, because the first, we just want to do trading. We don't want to have this kind of manufacturing capacity to be at home. So if we don't produce this at home, then how could we supply to the United States? This is something very basic. So the thing that we have to realize that we must have the effort and capacity to increase ourselves to be a producer of the good qualified productions to supply to the United States. And of course, through the way of networking that United States businesses are spreading around the globe, that we could come closer. Because when we talk about nearshoring, it is also something that could be translated into the business of the United States abroad that could be closer to Indonesia. So we don't have to force ourselves to be chosen by America, while the distance between Indonesia and the United States is very far. And of course, we have not the competitiveness in the distance when we compare with, let's say, Mexico or Canada. No, there is no reason. But try to think creatively, having more closer distance where the business of the United States of America is going abroad, and we could be closer to them. Mas Aryo, thank you.
I agree with that. And to your point about production, I mean, one of my favorite examples of that, I've spent some time in the healthcare industry over the years, and Thailand made a point of investing in its own production of medical devices. They had some Japanese investment for that, but they really made a point of investing in that, and that led to their own export abilities in the medical device area. And then I would also respond to Aisha's point by, in talking about Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, that I think I think of that, it is not a standard trade agreement. It is not a standard market access trade agreement. We can talk about all the reasons why it's not. But I think of that principally as an opportunity for Indonesia to come to the United States and not just wait for the US to say, here's what we want from IPEF about environment and clean energy and 5G and things like that, or 6G now, but for Indonesia to come and say, we are excited about this. Here's what we'd like to do with the with the IPEF. And I think that would be, I think it'd be about the only country that's really done that, for starters. And second, I think that would be very well received in the administration, because it would be really putting some more meat on the bones of that outline, if you will, and providing a way for this initiative to really take on some greater life of its own, which I think would benefit Indonesia tremendously. So I see a lot of these programs as not, I mean, as really as opportunities for the partner countries to come to the US and say, here's what we would like to do with this as well on the diplomatic level.
Thank you, John. Pak Nurul had mentioned that FTA is not a panacea to secure the supply chain from the US and its allies, or to reap benefits from the friendshoring approach that's been launched recently. Pak Nurul mentioned that Indonesia must increase the capabilities to produce high quality product or services to reap the benefits. So I'll ask question to Mbak Asia. What are the challenges from Indonesia to be able producing more high quality products and services so that we can become more competitive with Thailand and Vietnam?
Okay, I think one of the biggest challenges is that the productivity of our manufacturing sectors that we have already know, we experiencing lowering down the manufacturing shares to GDP in the whole during this period of time since like 1998 or 2002, and up till now we just have like 16 or 19% shares of manufacturing sectors. The thing is, this industrialization structural transformation, we need to be in the levels that we are able to be able to more competitive. I mean, in this we have to increase our productivity in total factor productivity itself. If we compare to our neighboring countries such as Thailand, Vietnam, we are in low competitiveness in terms of this kind of total factor productivity. What we could do in this matters is that we need to promote more our labor productivity to increase. This should be done in upgrading, upskilling their and then upgrading their knowledge as well, and then how to match the needs from the manufacturing sectors in terms of human resources, high quality human resources, to be to fulfill this kind of needs. So we have to promote this quality of labor first to promote productivity in these manufacturing sectors, because in this sense that we would like to diversify our products from natural resources based into the more value added products and more complex product. We need more skill, right? Or more labor, skilled labor to produce this. So we have to upgrade this labor factors in here. And the second thing is that infrastructures also need to be prepared for, if we would like to, for example, attracting more investment to put their factories, for examples. So this kind, and then also our regulations, compliance, and so on, and then this should be, I think this should be really put in stable as well. So I think maybe this is for me, and then get back to you, Aryo.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Aisha. We also again have a question from the chat room here from Mbak Francisca. He raised question about the increasing interest rates in Indonesia, the BI depo rate until 6% to saving bond retail. And the question, how do you think about this policy, specifically the policy, investment policy, whether investor or potential investor sees this policy good or bad for investor to invest in Indonesia? I think it's good, Pak Nurul, to share your thoughts about the questions. Please, Pak Nurul.
All right. Thank you, Mas Aryo. Yes, theoretically, when we talk about investment and saving, right? When we talk about investment and saving, so when a bank or the policymaker make the rate is higher, it means that it intends to attract more money coming to the saving account, right? So instead of doing a kind of investment, because this rate will be competing with the earn of investment when we do this kind of investment. So normally, in the normal situations, this raising of money will attract more money to come to saving instead of to the investment, right? And then at the same time as well, when BI increase the rate of this interest, it means that this will give also influence into the rate of credit, right? So it means that the cost of money for doing investment from the loan could be much more higher. That's the things. And the problem is actually we need to see whether or not the increase of this BI rate is intended to increase the investment or is intended to attract more capital to come to Indonesia first. And right after that, this could be then flow into the credit. It is depending on how the bank will play the game of rate between saving and also credit. So this is something that need to be seen. So for the investment, I think this will not be any direct impact on this until the bank will then distribute this money of saving into right policy to provide this for investment credit, right? And we know that currently the flow of this money to Asia is also getting stronger, and especially it is coming to Singapore, for example, right? And when it is coming to Singapore and it is coming into Indonesia as well, for example, so this is not the right policy only keeping this money in the bank. That is not the system how economic running. So we have to respond this with other policy, how this money could be transferred into real business. Yeah, because of this then, it should be followed by other policy, by relevant ministry, that they should to sit together with BI and think of the possibility providing the right funding through the bank system to wider businesses in Indonesia. So if it is responded with this policy, then I should say the policy coming from BI responding with a good policy between BI and also other policymaker that will provide this funding from banking system into the business sector will give impact into a better funding provider for having more business in Indonesia. Mas Aryo.
Thank you, Pak Nurul. Let's back to the topic. John, do you think friendshoring can solve global supply chain problem, which concentrated on few countries?
What problem? I'm sorry.
Yeah, can friendshoring solve our recent supply chain problem, which concentrated on few countries?
Yes, I think that was very much part of the impetus for this friendshoring idea, was not just this economic rivalry with China, but as we saw in the pandemic, the lockdowns had tremendous impacts on the global economy, from China in particular, also from other countries. But I think very much a part of the impetus for this was to solve supply chain problems by making supply chains more resilient, more robust, and in some cases more redundant, so there would not have these bottlenecks. I mean, it goes back to that chart that Pak Nurul showed about concentration in certain industries among three countries, and this kind of thing. So friendshoring is a way to diversify that and to encourage people to take a look at broader economic opportunities around the globe.
Okay, so I want to offer to Mbak Asia. I'm interested about your thoughts. What are the potential geopolitical concerns of moving operations or plans to a new country which is allied to a specific countries like the US?
It's geopolitical concerns. I think, well, actually, honestly, my field is not really into geopoliticals. But then, if we relating to economic trade, international trade, then if there is this friendshoring working, then there will be. So before pandemics, we tend to more globalize, right? Connecting to each other into the global supply chains. And then, like we have already know that the disruptions in supply is making this kind of globalizations into more regionalisms, and also people would like to considering countries will considering into friendshoring. So not only US, but also probably the EU, as well as probably Asian economies, advanced Asian economies would like to apply this kind of friendshoring policy as well. So we would like also there will be some kind of probably blocking or kind of regionalism into trade into more regionals. I think that should be my explanation now. Thank you, Aryo.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Asia. And John, I think I have questions for you about the IRA itself. It's been mentioning on the some source that it's still developing. I mean, the government also still thinking about more technical issue to establish or to implement this IRA in the implementation. So, do you have any idea about the direction of this IRA?
Let me make comments about that. First, as I'm sure you've read in the international business press, South Korea and the European Union in particular have complained about some of the provisions with requiring too much American content, and Japan may be complaining a little bit, but they're not talking about that too much. And the president said that he was open to some modifications here in terms of working with those countries, with our allies. And as I'm sure you also saw, the European Union is starting its own version of the IRA with incentives and industrial policy focusing on the green economy. So there could be some changes here at the margins in terms of how that is interpreted. The other aspect of this here, short lesson on US administrative law, once Congress passes a bill, some provisions may or may not be self-executing. And in terms of tax credits, for instance, the Internal Revenue Service has to provide guidance to US taxpayers on how they may claim the credit or what applies for the credit or things like that. That process is still continuing. And I'll give you an example. There was a major provision in the IRA, had nothing to do with climate, saying that there is going to be a 1% tax on public companies who buy back their own stock on the public markets. The law was passed in July. The IRS, our Internal Revenue Service, did not issue its regulations on that until December 27th, which was just in time to get it in for the 2022 tax year. So yes, I do expect there will be further implementing regulations from the Internal Revenue Service and from some of our substantive agencies, such as the Environmental Protection Agency and the Treasury Department, as to the actual implementation of this very complex law.
So, would there any possible, major changes in the future on the technical level of the policy, John?
Change would require an act of Congress. And right now, after our elections last year, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, the House barely by the Republicans. It's going to be very difficult to get legislation passed. So I don't see any major changes for at least a little while here. But it will be very interesting to see in a year or so how companies are starting to take advantage of these tax credits. This is not the work of a moment. This is 2024, 2025, 2026. And equally, I see the opportunities for a country like Indonesia in that medium term, as well as we see how how companies are strategizing to take advantage of these tax incentives. And thus Indonesian companies should be trying to find American partners now to help them with that.
Okay. So it's interesting, John. Hearing about uh, the development of politics in the US. So there should be political process to launch several technical policy to support the IRA itself. And you mentioned that the Congress, which is led by a Republic, also I think there's it's a challenge for the Biden administration to pass several technical policy to related to the friendshoring or IRA as well.
But I will also say this, that a concern over China is shared by both parties, very strong. And I think we just saw this last week in this incident regarding the balloon and one example. But I think that is an area of bipartisan cooperation. And I think, therefore, that does mean that policies like friendshoring will be popular among both political parties. What I was speaking about earlier was a regulatory process within our executive branch to implement the actual provisions of the IRA.
So Republic Party support the friendshoring approach. Yeah.
Almost exclusively against the IRA. It was passed solely with the votes of the Democrats, but perspective, because they said it was going to add to the deficit. They didn't like a lot of the climate spending, but they do not have the votes to repeal it because the Democrats control the Senate. And a lot of companies order parts of the country that have Republican representatives in Congress are going to take advantage of these tax credits. So even if people voted against it last year, the politicians are going to come to the ribbon cutting when that new clean energy factory is open. I can guarantee you that. So.
So the concern from the Republic is on the climate issue from the IRA policy, yeah?
There have been differences in terms of how the Republicans and the Democrats would handle climate policy. I mean, that's a much longer conversation. But you know, I think for right now, the main point is that the IRA is law. It is being implemented, and companies will start taking advantage of these tax credits and other incentives, I think, within the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, thank you, John. So, Pak Nurul, what do you think about our conversation? I mean, with John about the reasons. There are probability there. I mean, the future direction of the IRA still not sure. I think, John, correct me if I'm wrong. Pak Nurul, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, I guess something that could also influence the decisions for the next ruling of this IRA. This will be depending on how close the discussions between the Democrats and the Republicans with the business players there, right? Because finally, the implementations will be responded by the business players there and their allies abroad. Because this will be then, once it is implemented, then they are going to design about the best way that could be done in order to work together between the parties and also the entrepreneurs there in order to make the American better. And some of them also taking their own advantages of taking this subsidy for its own businesses. It is possible as well. But I do believe at the time they combine this policy with the nation, with the national interest of providing more sources coming from the France, I still think that the implementations of this by the private sectors will consider closely the policy that will be issued by the government of United States. Because by having this, practically, basically, by having this kind of subsidies, so this will cut the cost of them. And this will make their productions more competitive. And this will then redesign again about the ecosystem that is currently established already for very long period, but then facing this kind of challenges, then they have to think about something new. They have to think about the possibility of having collaborations with the friends that is already defined by the government. Because they cannot be just standing alone, designing about American economy without involvement of government with its regulations. So I guess that the next interesting dynamic that we have to see on the stage is how would be the Democrats and also the Republicans having these connections with the business sectors.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that even though the Republicans didn't vote for it, they know it's a law, they know it's not going anywhere. So I think that the IRA is going to continue without major changes for the next several years.
So, Mbak Asia, yeah. So with the recent developments on the U.S. policy process just been mentioned from John, what do you think? I mean, what can the government of Indonesia do in preparing to reap benefits from the friendshoring approach from the U.S.?
Yeah, we have already heard that there is a political dynamics in the U.S. about this kind of, one of the program in the friendshorings. But then we have to look at to the trend in global, global trades, and then the potential market for sustainable and clean energies are in there. I mean, we are going forward to that kind of products that we should, this kind of potential, we have to meet these conditions, and then we have already also have visions or target or agenda for Indonesia Vision 2045, that we have to move into the highly income countries, right? So yeah, this kind of potential that we look toward to. So we have to need more investment, right? Because to diversify or to produce more complex products that are can be exported to more income for Indonesia, and then this need more investment, I think, for sure, to support downstreaming industries, right? So these investments are important. So how to attract this investment? We have already discussed so much before, right? First is that we have to make sure that Indonesia is attractive, Indonesia is competitive other than our peer countries, peer Asian economies, such as, for example, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, right? So what we could offer to investors, right, to come to here, first, Nurul have mentioned the market. We have potential market, we have big population, and then we have source of energy, source of important energy in here, right? Minerals and resources, right? To be produced more, to be right. And then this third, right, we can promote by giving some incentive for the investors who would like to come to here. So we are welcome. We are welcome for any partner, right? Any partners from countries, from US, from any other partners who would like to promote this kind of downstreaming policy in here. So we do not export low value added goods anymore. So we can upgrade into more highly technology. We need to more export more value added goods. So this kind of goods needs more investment. I think that's my points. Thank you, Ariel. Get back to you, Ariel.
Thank you, Mbak Asia. We already have here His Excellency Minister of Investment, Pak Bahlil Lahadalia. But before to Pak Bahlil, I would like to invite all speakers to share the closing remarks for your presentation. First, please, Pak Nurul and John, and last but not least, Mbak Asia.
All right, yes, thank you, Pak Arya. As from the government perspective, of course, the government of Indonesia will try to make a good response into the policy coming from the United States, because we know that it is an opportunity for us to be the partner of the United States and also to collaborate together in order to supply the world with a good product, with a good standards, and also with good cooperations between Indonesia and United States. But then the thing that I would like also to invite to the private sectors, they have to be sit together to with the government and think about a good positivity that we could provide productively in order to respond to the policy coming from the United States. So then this policy could be a kind of benefit for both countries, Indonesia and United States, in order to supply the need of the global market. So that's the things that I have to raise, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Nurul. Over to you, John, for your closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been a wonderful webinar, and I completely agree. This is a tremendous opportunity for Indonesia, and I really look forward to seeing how Indonesia takes advantage of this and works with U.S. companies on building those supply chains that are robust, resilient, redundant, and I sincerely hope involve many deep partnerships between American and Indonesian companies. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, John. And last but not least, over to you, Mbak Asia, for your closing remarks.
Yeah, okay, thank you. From this webinar discussion, I have some highlights on how can Indonesia boost our opportunity into some kind of partnership with the US. But in our side in Indonesia, we have the vision to be higher income countries, and then to produce more, to boost our export in highly value added through downstreaming. So we need more capital, we need more investment on it. So we have to work hard to attract this investment coming to Indonesia to support this kind of downstreaming agenda for highly growth for Indonesia in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Asia. And now I would like to invite His Excellency Minister of Investment, Pak Bahlil Lahadalia, to provide closing remarks. Pak Menteri, silakan.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak Ibu semua yang saya hormati. Saya akan mencoba untuk menyampaikan tentang beberapa perkembangan kondisi investasi di Indonesia, baik di tahun 2022 dan prospek tahun 2023. Saya pikir kita semua sudah paham terhadap kondisi ekonomi global yang sampai dengan sekarang masih dibayang-bayangi dengan ketidakpastian, dan ini dampak dari persoalan pandemi COVID, kemudian yang kedua perang Ukraina sama Rusia juga belum selesai, dan yang ketiga adalah juga ada pertarungan secara ekonomi antara beberapa negara di dunia ya, ada geng Amerika, Eropa, kemudian China, dan untuk khusus di kawasan ASEAN itu ada terjadi ketegangan antara Tiongkok dan Taiwan. Mudah-mudahan tidak terjadi. Tetapi Indonesia punya secerca harapan. Kami mengatakan bahwa sekalipun pertumbuhan ekonomi global dalam beberapa hasil survei dari beberapa lembaga dunia yang mengatakan bahwa pertumbuhan ekonomi global susah untuk diprediksi, sekalipun ada kecenderungan untuk resesi, tetapi kita lihat berapa dalam resesi itu terjadi. Tapi Indonesia punya potensi yang sangat bagus untuk tidak seperti pertumbuhan ekonomi global. Hal ini bisa terlihat dari pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia sekarang. Kita rata-rata dari Januari sampai dengan Desember 2022, alhamdulillah tumbuh sekitar 5,3%. Ini mencapai target dari APBN kami. Jadi ini adalah mencapai target dari APBN kami. Dan ini mencerminkan bahwa perputaran ekonomi nasional itu cukup luar biasa dikontribusikan dalam aspek konsumsi. Ekspor impor kita juga cukup bagus, tapi tidak sesignifikan kalau dibandingkan dengan konsumsi dan investasi. Nah, investasi kita di tahun 2022 target Bapak Presiden kepada kami itu kurang lebih sekitar 1.200 triliun. Ini investasi di luar hulu migas dan di luar sektor keuangan dan di luar sektor UMKM. Ini sektor industri yang di sektor real. Yang menariknya adalah kita mampu mencatat dari 1.207 triliun itu, kita mampu mencatat sebesar 54,2% itu dari FDI. Dan PMDN itu 45,8%. Ini menunjukkan bahwa global itu menaruh harapan dan kepercayaan besar kepada Indonesia, dan ini dibuktikan dengan bagaimana kemudian FDI kita mampu tumbuh 40% secara year on year, 40% lebih. Dan di sisi lain, tujuan investasi yang masuk ke Indonesia tidak hanya di Jawa, tapi di luar Pulau Jawa sekarang sangat signifikan. Dan itu terlihat dari realisasi investasi 2022 itu sebesar 52,7% di luar Pulau Jawa dan di Jawa 47,3%. Nah, Bapak Ibu semua, apa yang saya mau sampaikan, tren dari realisasi investasi kita antara Jawa dan luar Jawa sejak 2019 dan 2022 itu sudah mulai jalannya bagus sekali. Ini mencerminkan bahwa Indonesia tidak membangun hanya Jawa sentris, tapi Indonesia ingin membangun Indonesia sentris yang luasnya itu dari Aceh sampai Papua. Dan memang secara kebetulan sumber daya alam kita dalam proses untuk pembangunan hilirisasi itu lebih banyak di luar Pulau Jawa. Ada di Kalimantan, di Sumatera, di Sulawesi, di Maluku, dan Papua, baik maupun NTT. Nah, inilah kemudian potensi-potensi yang bisa digarap oleh para investor yang akan melakukan di Indonesia. Nah, negara-negara mana saja sih yang cenderung masuk ke Indonesia? Bapak Ibu semua, negara yang masuk pertama itu adalah Singapura. Singapura kita tahu bahwa masih tetap menjadi yang pertama masuk melakukan investasi di Indonesia sebesar 13,281 billion US dollar pada 2022 dan ini mulai sejak 2019. Kita tahu bahwa FDI yang masuk di Asia Tenggara yang paling besar itu Singapura, tapi itu sektor keuangan. Dan sektor real itu nomor pertama itu adalah Indonesia. Tapi saya ingin mengatakan ya, data 13,281 billion US dollar ini tidak semuanya uang dari Singapura. Berkali-kali saya katakan bahwa ini sebagian uang orang Indonesia yang ada di Singapura, tapi dijadikan hub di Singapura. Bahkan beberapa negara lain, Singapura dijadikan sebagai hub. Karena itu FDI dia paling besar di sana. Yang kedua, Tiongkok. Tiongkok nomor 2, habis itu Hong Kong, Jepang, Malaysia ini juga, ini sebagian investasi dari Korea masuk lewat Malaysia. Kemudian Amerika. Dan yang menguntungkan bagi kami sekarang itu adalah dalam 3 tahun terakhir, yang sebelumnya tidak pernah terjadi, Uni Eropa masuk dalam 10 besar, minimal ada 2 negara. Jadi nggak benar kalau Indonesia itu hanya dikepung FDI-nya oleh salah satu negara tertentu. Jadi kami merata. Nah, arah kebijakan Indonesia ke depan, kami betul-betul fokus pada penciptaan nilai tambah lewat hilirisasi. Dan itu terbukti dari fokus di bidang apa aja investasi itu masuk. Jadi yang pertama adalah industri logam dasar, ini tetap masih menjadi urutan pertama. Jadi 2019 Indonesia terjadi deindustrialisasi, karena kita lihat investasinya lebih mengarah kepada sektor jasa, tentang transportasi. Tetapi sejak 2020, 2021, 2022, kami mencoba untuk melakukan lompatan yang jauh dalam rangka memberikan nilai tambah. Kemudian industri logam dasar, barang logam bukan mesin dan peralatannya, ini adalah bagian dari pembangunan industrinya dan sekarang 171,2 triliun dibandingkan dengan 2019 itu hanya 61,6 triliun. Jadi kelipatannya tinggi sekali. Nah, Bapak Ibu semua, apa sih yang membuat kenapa Indonesia bisa masuk menjadi negara tujuan yang hari ini mohon maaf saya harus katakan lagi bagus-bagusnya? Yang pertama memang karena memang stabilitas politik hukum kita cukup baik. Kita jarang terjadi gejolak politik pergantian kepemimpinan setiap 1 tahun, nggak ada. Kami tetap konsisten bahwa 5 tahun sekali kita lakukan. Kemudian hukum kita sangat, pemberantasan korupsi juga sangat menjadi fokus. Reform terhadap berbagai macam regulasi yang tumpang tindih dalam rangka percepatan pun kita lakukan. Dan kebijakan-kebijakan lain yang betul-betul bisa memberikan ruang yang cukup secara kompetitif dalam rangka melakukan investasi. Yang kedua, Indonesia itu punya jumlah penduduk 43% dari total populasi penduduk Asia Tenggara. Jadi sangatlah tidak tepat kalau dunia menganggap bahwa populasi penduduk Asia Tenggara itu adalah negara lain. Dan kita sudah mengatakan, kita sama Asia Tenggara harus saling mendukung. Satu lagi, Indonesia sekarang itu penciptaan kelas menengah itu lebih dari 100 juta. Inilah pasar yang besar. Ini pasar yang sangat luar biasa sekali yang bisa kita dorong untuk sampai dengan 2040-2045 menuju Indonesia emas. Maka target kami pendapatan per kapita harus di atas 10.000 US dollar. Sumber daya alam udah pasti sangat melimpah. kita mempunyai nikel terbesar di dunia, cadangan nikel terbesar di dunia, dan juga potensi terhadap energi baru terbarukan, dan karbon terbesar ketiga di dunia, itu di Indonesia. Sekalipun harganya masih di bawah dibandingkan dengan negara-negara seperti di Eropa, karena pakai standar ganda itu. Harga jual karbonnya mahal, sementara di negara-negara berkembang dibuat harga murah. Padahal kita berbicara tentang green, menurunkan emisi. Jadi aku melihatnya kondisi ini agak sedikit tidak konsisten ya, tidak konsisten dalam penerapan terutama Paris Agreement nomor 6 pasal 6. Arah kebijakan negara ke depan seperti apa? Bapak Ibu semua, saya katakan bahwa Indonesia akan fokus pada hilirisasi. Hilirisasi adalah harga mati. Di mana hilirisasi itu pendekatannya industri adalah green industry dan green energy. Dan hilirisasi ini adalah instrumen untuk bagaimana mewujudkan SDGs. Karena SDGs itu jangan salah diartikan hanya karena lingkungan aja. Kadang-kadang ada beberapa negara menjadikan SDGs ini sebagai senjata yang bermata dua. Kalau merugikan mereka dihantam negara lain. Ini nggak fair. Nah, kita ingin melakukan hilirisasi dalam rangka penataan lingkungan, dalam rangka penciptaan nilai tambah, dalam rangka menciptakan kawasan pertumbuhan ekonomi baru, dalam rangka memberikan lapangan pekerjaan yang layak, dan juga adalah bagaimana melakukan kolaborasi dengan UMKM yang ada. Ini konsistensi kita. Bagaimana metodenya? Saya ambil satu contoh, kita membangun hilirisasi di sektor nikel. Bapak Ibu semua, pada tahun 2017, 2018, nikel, kita melakukan ekspor nikel kita itu hanya sekitar 3,3 miliar US dollar. Ketika kita belum melakukan hilirisasi yang masif. 2019-2020, kita melakukan penyetopan ekspor ore nikel. Dan di tahun 2021, ekspor nikel kita itu mencapai 20,9 miliar US dollar, dan di 2022 itu mencapai hampir 30 miliar US dollar. Dan ini kita lakukan secara komprehensif. Dengan bagaimana membangun ekosistem daripada turunan nikel seperti EV baterai. Dan EV baterai di Indonesia kita pingin untuk bagaimana menjadi salah satu negara produsen baterai terbesar di dunia. Kenapa? Karena ini terintegrasi. Kita mulai dari smelter, dari mining, smelter, prekursor, cathode, sampai baterai sel. Tapi apa yang terjadi? Kita dibawa ke WTO oleh Uni Eropa. Ini aku bilang begini, ini kok masih ada negara di dunia yang sudah merdeka masih ada seperti penjajah baru gitu. Ini nggak benar dengan alasan bahwa ini terjadi monopoli pasar. Padahal kan kita melakukan hilirisasi itu dalam rangka mewujudkan SDGs. Bayangkan Bapak Ibu semua, kalau kita melakukan ekspor ore nikel, penambangannya tidak mematuhi kaidah-kaidah lingkungan, apakah kita gagalkan SDGs? Bayangkan kalau cuma hanya kita ekspor ore nikel tanpa ada nilai tambah, di mana pertumbuhan ekonomi negara itu? Dan saya mengatakan bahwa sekalipun kita dibawa ke WTO, nggak ada masalah, itu hak mereka. Tapi kami tidak akan pernah gentar untuk melawan itu. Karena semua negara harus menghargai keputusan strategi dari masing-masing negara untuk membawa negaranya ke arah yang lebih baik. Nggak boleh negara A mengintervensi negara B. Negara ini semua udah pada dunia ini udah pada merdeka, gitu loh. Dan kita menghargai. Contoh kecil, Uni Eropa sekarang melarang dengan undang-undangnya agar seluruh pembangunan baterai sel itu harus dekat dengan pabrik manufaktur mobil. Apa ini tidak bentuk pelanggaran besar? Bahkan sekarang membangun lagi undang-undang untuk prekursor cathode harus di negara di mana ada pabrik mobilnya. Ya saya katakan kalau mau seperti itu berarti kita nggak usah ekspor bahan baku ke sana kalau begitu. Jadi harus cengli gitu loh, harus fair. Dan Saya jujur mengatakan kepada Bapak Ibu semua, tolong dicatat kalau ada teman-teman saya dari manapun, bahwa negara-negara berkembang ini belajar pada negara-negara maju seperti Eropa. Bagaimana dulu ketika abad 16 Inggris melarang ekspor wol. Itu dalam rangka untuk bagaimana meningkatkan nilai tambah di negaranya. Dan di abad 16 2017 itu hebat sekali. Amerika di abad 4, di abad 19, di abad 20 mempergunakan pajak progresif impor dalam rangka memberikan penguatan industri dalam negerinya. China tahun 80 mempergunakan TKDN 90%. Finlandia pada tahun 86 FDI yang masuk boleh masuk di perusahaan di sana hanya 20%. Kemudian negara-negara itu menjadi negara-negara hebat. Dan pada umumnya sekarang bagus-bagus. Kami ini hanya belajar pada tuan-tuan kok. Kami ini hanya belajar pada negara-negara yang udah maju duluan. Masa kami nggak boleh belajar pada kesuksesan bapak-bapak gitu. Jadi saya pikir apa yang dilakukan oleh negara berkembang termasuk Indonesia ini hanya bagian dari cara untuk bagaimana mendorong agar dari negara berkembang menjadi negara maju untuk menjadi peradaban di dunia. Nah, ini contoh-contoh kecil. Jadi kita sudah membangun ekosistem EV baterai, ada LG masuk ya, LG itu investasinya sekitar 142 triliun atau 8,9 billion. Ada CATL, ada Foxconn, ada VW, BASF. Kita membuka, jadi kita nggak melarang untuk FDI masuk ke Indonesia, masuk aja. Mau dari negara manapun, silakan masuk. Kami terbuka, terkecuali kami melarang untuk FDI itu masuk dalam rangka mengelola sumber daya alam kami. Gitu. Kita fair dong. Nah, ini contoh daripada ekosistem salah satu komoditas yang kita lagi dorong dengan tetap memakai energi baru terbarukan. Karena kan kita lagi fokus nih untuk memakai energi baru terbarukan. Ini yang kita harus goaling. Nah, di samping itu, kita juga lagi sedang tahun ini kita melarang ekspor boksit. Karena kita melakukan hilirisasi juga yang sama. Koper, kita juga melarang nanti tahun ini. Kalau masih ada negara yang tidak senang dengan apa yang dilakukan oleh Indonesia dalam rangka memperhatikan lingkungan, menciptakan nilai tambah, yaitu hak mereka, monggo-monggo aja. Kami tetap konsisten dan tahu arah kebijakan negara kami untuk bagaimana mendorong untuk itu bisa terjadi. Nah, sudah barang tentu selain boksit, tembaga, timah, kita juga sekarang sudah membangun yang namanya peta jalan hilirisasi bagi Indonesia sampai dengan 2040 di 21 komoditas. Yang jumlah investasinya kurang lebih sekitar 545,3 miliar US dollar sampai dengan 2040. Ini adalah jalan strategi yang harus Indonesia lakukan dalam rangka meningkatkan pendapatan per kapita, dalam rangka bagaimana mendorong menjadi negara yang baik, dan yang kedua adalah bagaimana yang ketiga mengoptimalisasikan sumber daya alam yang ada. Ini adalah strategi negara. Yang keempat, saya juga ingin menyampaikan tentang investasi yang hijau. Saya itu bingung ya kepada dunia yang kita sepakat katanya sok jagoan kita semua ini. Bayangkan investasi hijau yang menjadi konsensus global untuk kita bebas karbonisasi pada 2050 sampai 2060, tapi aliran investasinya tidak adil. Aliran investasi untuk industri hijau itu di negara-negara berkembang itu hanya 1/5 dari total aliran investasi. Sementara negara berkembang itu adalah 2/3 dari populasi dunia. Artinya hanya 1/5 dana yang mengalir dari total populasi 2/3 di dunia. Jadi bagaimana mungkin kita bisa melakukan suatu gerakan bersama, gotong royong bersama untuk kita menurunkan emisi rumah kaca. Jadi ini antara perencanaan global dengan strategi itu terjadi kontraproduktif. Dan ini saya meyakini akan menjadi salah satu faktor penghambat selama kita tidak menyadari bahwa ini akan menjadi persoalan kita bersama. Ya termasuk harga karbon juga, saya tadi di awal katakan, coba bayangkan harga karbon. Kita sekarang bagaimana memelihara hutan, memelihara mangrove, memelihara rumput padang, ya, memelihara karang, agar melahirkan karbon yang baik. Tapi di sisi lain harganya miring. Negara-negara berkembang harga karbon dihargai cuma $20. Negara-negara maju seperti Uni Eropa dihargai $100. Sekarang baru $30 Indonesia. Nah, begitu ditanya kenapa harganya berbeda? Apa ada perhitungan yang lain? Ternyata capex-nya lebih mahal di Eropa ketimbang negara-negara berkembang. Karena negara berkembang itu masih ada hutannya yang banyak, masih ada lautnya banyak, mangrove-nya banyak, sehingga capex-nya itu lebih kecil dibandingkan negara-negara yang di sana yang hutannya sudah habis. Nah, kalau cara berpikir seperti itu, pertanyaan berikut adalah apakah ini cara negara-negara yang hebat-hebat itu merangsang negara-negara berkembang untuk menghabisi dulu hutannya, merusak dulu lingkungannya, supaya kita startnya apple to apple dari nol gitu. Baru harga karbon kita sama. Tapi saya ingin katakan bahwa pikiran kami tidak sekotor yang Bapak-Bapak bayangkan. Kami sayang lingkungan. Kami sayang generasi kami masa depan. Kami sayang dunia. Kami sayang umat manusia yang ada di muka bumi. Tanpa terkecuali. Tanpa membeda-bedakan negara manapun. Dan tolong jangan ajarin kami bagaimana cara mengelola lingkungan. Karena negara kami, negara-negara berkembang dan Indonesia masih yang terbaik dalam pengelolaan lingkungan, karena buktinya kami punya pemakaian emisinya hanya 2,4 ton per kakak dibandingkan dengan yang lain. Jadi jangan yang rusakin lingkungan mengajari yang belum rusakin lingkungan gitu loh. Nah, ini penting juga saya sampaikan agar kita itu harus fair. Kalau kita mau bicara secara global yang baik. Dan saya pikir investasi yang masuk ke Indonesia, monggo kita akan melakukan pelayanan yang baik karena kita melakukan reform regulasi yang baik. Kita pingin dunia ini baik. Kita pingin distribusinya semuanya baik. Rantai pasok harus baik. Dan karena itu saya pikir harus ada kesamaan pandang untuk setara dalam memajukan global. Negara-negara manapun yang sudah merdeka kita harus saling menghargai. Dan kita harus menghargai keunggulan komparatif dari masing-masing negara dalam rangka pengelolaan investasinya. Dalam bahasa kami, bahwa Presiden Jokowi mengatakan bahwa kita pingin berkolaborasi. Kita pingin bekerja sama. Tapi harus setara. Jangan bekerja sama, yang duluan maju, yang lain di belakang. Itu nggak fair. Tapi kita pingin bekerja sama, kolaborasi untuk sama-sama maju. Dan duduk sama rendah, berdiri sama tinggi dalam memajukan global yang lebih baik. Saya pikir itu beberapa poin-poin pemaparan saya pada siang hari ini. Untuk Aryo dan Indef, saya ucapkan selamat karena kalian adalah orang-orang muda yang punya pemikiran bagus dalam mengontrol perkembangan Indonesia. Nah, apalagi baru dilihat ada Prof. Didik Rahbini, guru saya, yang tadi saya menyampaikan itu adalah sebagian besar pikiran dari Prof. Didik Rahbini yang mencoba untuk melakukan kolaborasi dengan kami. Dan saya pikir ke depan, dunia ini akan aman kalau kita butuh kerjasama kolaborasi yang win-win. Yang harus betul-betul fair. Selama masih ada triki, saya tidak menjamin ada sebuah keterbukaan. Tapi kalau kita mau senasib sepenanggungan dalam konteks membawa dunia ke arah yang lebih baik, baik dalam konteks ekonomi, dalam konteks pengangguran, dalam konteks menurunkan emisi, maka saya punya keyakinan besar kita semua ini adalah bagian orang-orang yang diberikan kesempatan oleh Tuhan dalam meletakkan sejarah untuk kebaikan penduduk, manusia, dan seluruh alam di muka bumi untuk ke depan. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Menteri. Izinkan saya menyampaikan beberapa poin dalam bahasa Inggris untuk mitra kami di US mengenai poin-poin yang Pak Menteri telah sampaikan. Please allow me to also take few highlighted points from Minister's closing remarks. Indonesia's foreign direct investment have been impressive, surged 44.2% on a yearly basis in 2022, with the base metal sector growing in the biggest inflows. The investment minister also noting that 2023 will be a difficult year to attract investment. The biggest source of funds were Singapore, China, and Hong Kong. Considering the quarter of the 2022 FDI jumped around 43%. The minister also pointed out that Indonesia welcomes all countries to investment in Indonesia. Indonesia always sits in the middle. Pak Menteri mentioned also the government has started to advance the economy through downstream industry policy in Indonesia. This policy will make the transition from low-cost production to a high-value added manufacturing industry. The downstreaming industry policy also in line to support the SDGs and Indonesia climate commitment. Mr. Minister also expressed his concern on EU response on Indonesia policy which ban commodities exporting, and Indonesia will continue this policy to support downstreaming industry agenda. Also, the unfairness of carbon price gap between developed country and developing countries. The government of Indonesia also planning to introduce more priority commodities. Mr. Minister also requests fair trade and investment collaboration. All countries should respect each other's sovereignty. Indonesia follow advanced country policy that had been taken decades ago that banned their export product to support its home industry. The government of Indonesia also had launched a roadmap of downstreaming investment to 2040. This roadmap provides information on downstreaming policy through investment. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, I'd like to close this forum by thanking all of speaker, especially Pak Menteri. Terima kasih Pak Menteri atas waktu dan poin-poinnya yang sangat strategis di waktu ini. I would like also to thank all of the participants for joining us. Saya akhiri, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Menteri. Thank you John, Pak Nurul, Mbak Aisyah.
Terima kasih, thank you very much, Pak Nurul, John. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, I thought it went
Thank
very
you.
well. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Pak John, Pak Didik, and all the speakers, and from Indef. Very good job. Very well done. Thanks a lot.
Thank you Pak Nurul. See you.
Artists. So much. Okay. Have a good day.
Izin pamit ya. Terima kasih.
All right. Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
Have a good night, John. Thank you.